Let's get over to our Pinpoint Weather Center with meteorologist Andrew Brightman and Brandon Lawson. Guys, this storm just really had some of the perfect conditions to cause the damage it did in western North Carolina.
Yeah, that's absolutely right, Morgan. And Brandon was taking a close look at some of those factors that came together last week. We were talking about the jet streak entrance, creating all that upper level rising, and then there were other factors that really we talk about squeezing all of the moisture out of the atmosphere, sort of like squeezing a sponge here, Brandon. That really kind of all came together for the flooding that we saw.
Yeah, all that wind crashing up against the mountains and that rising air over the mountains, that just produces your clouds and rain. And when you have heavy wind like we saw last week crashing against the mountains, that's just going to increase some of that heavy rainfall rate that we saw over the mountains last Friday. Let's go ahead and jump right on into it. First, I want to get you a live look from King Street over in Boone. Obviously, this has probably been one of the better traveling areas ever since Helene last Friday, but King Street was underwater. You can actually see still some of the darker brown spots there from some of the dirt and sediment from last week. So definitely still a lot of recovery happening over in the Boone area. I do want to show you again how all of this happened last week. So we have something in meteorology called orographic lifting. We also refer to it as upslope rain. And it happens when you have the winds perpendicular to the mountains. So bringing Tropical Storm Helene in here, the flow around Tropical Storm Helene was counterclockwise. So that wind was crashing up against the mountains. Now it's creating that upslope flow. Again, that upslope flow occurs when those winds are perpendicular to the mountains and crashing into the mountains, allowing that air to rise. And as that air rises, it cools and condenses, and that creates your clouds and rain over the mountains. So I want to show you a 3D look at how this all works. So here's your mountains here. We'll call this the Gulf of Mexico or the Atlantic Ocean, one of the two. Anywhere you have a supply of moisture, you're going to have that moisture crashing up against the mountains. That moisture, again, is lifting up the mountains, and that continuous stream of moisture rising over the mountains, and that lift along the mountains is helping produce your heavier rain there. Because again, as that air and moisture is rising up the mountain there, that air is cooling, condensing, and that's producing your clouds and rain. And the more stronger your wind is, the more heavy rain you can produce because your air is rising a little bit quicker, and that's what we saw last week. Something else we saw was a lot of mudslides out of this, not just the rain filling into the valleys and some of the smaller creeks, rivers, and streams rising quickly, but we saw a lot of mudslides too. The reason why is because the gravity is pressing down the mountains. It wants the mountains to go down here, so whenever you get your soil saturated due to that heavy rain, again, ground gets very unstable. So the gravity becomes stronger than the friction holding that soil together itself, and that allows those mountain slopes to eventually slope down, and that produces those mudslides that we saw last week as well. Let's get you a live look from West Charlotte right now. Again, it is a quiet scene across the Carolinas, and Andrew, that's been the good thing too, because we need this dry, tranquil stretch of weather to really help out with the relief effort over there in the Carolinas.